Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. I thank everybody that's involved with this process because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers.
Experience is not about the publisher, it is about us, the authors.
Hello, I'm Harold Kooden, and I'm here for two reasons. One, to promote my book, which is called Golden Men, The Power of Gay Midlife. And by the way, that is a picture I took myself. It's from the Iguazu Falls in Brazil. Now, I'm not used to talking and just keeping going. I'd like to get more interaction with you and find out who you are so I can say things that are more relevant to what you want to know. So, if you know anything about the book, the original book came out in 2000, and it was the first of its kind because there was never any book written specifically for gay men on aging issues. There had been some books written, professional books on aging, but basically they were for white, non-gay men. And so I decided back in the 80s that I needed to do something because I discovered with AIDS, many, many men, unfortunately, were more scared of growing old as gay men than dealing with death and AIDS itself. And so I figured there was a time we needed to get this book out, and it's a self-help book. The first part is theoretical about gay issues, about the gay coming out process, and why that, in a sense, teaches us how we can deal with aging and other life crises. We've learned a lot in that process, and I wanted to share the knowledge. The book is also a self-help book in that you can pick up the book by yourself or with friends and go through chapter by chapter answering the questions. Now, it takes what I would consider, this literally takes maybe a year, maybe more, if you do it seriously. It's something you can do by yourself, as I said, or with friends. And the end result is really about 4 years of intensive psychotherapy. And it's around how to age. Now, one important point I'd like to make is that when the book came out, I was very clear that I was referring only to white gay men who found and needed to work on their issues of aging. And I did not want the book to speak to anyone else, any other group, because I felt that was not in my purview. But what I've discovered since the book came out, and now people of all ages, both gay, non-gay, male, female, everybody said there's something in it that they found very, very useful. So I can say now the book is for everyone. But before I go on, I'd like to find out who you are, because I'd like this interchange to be one where I can answer some of your questions. So I'd like to know who you are, your ages maybe, if you feel like sharing that, or just simply, what are the questions you have? Okay, so, and it can be anything connected to the topic of aging or around gay and lesbian issues. I've been an activist in the community since the early 70s. Literally in 1970 is when I started being active in the gay community, though I was an activist before then. So give me your questions. Let me know who you are. I hopefully Cassandra and Franz, who were here with me yesterday, if they're on, like to hear from them too. Okay. Well, we'll just wait till some questions come through. So, as I said, the reason I wanted to write this book is because I had so many experiences with gay men who were given diagnoses about being infected. This was back in actually when it was GRID, the gay-related immune deficiency. And for me, the classic story I tell is one day I literally had I had two men referred to me by my referral physician. He was the only openly gay physician in New York City at the time. And both of these men had been given a diagnosis that they were going to die, because that in that time, if you were HIV positive, there was only one treatment, and that usually killed everybody at the time. So they both got very depressed and came to me, and I asked, and so they said, they were told they have a year to live. And so I treated them both the same. I asked them simply, okay, tell me, how, now that you know you're going to die, how are you going to live the rest of your life? And it shocked both of them. I saw them both separately. Interestingly, they both were two white men, both around the ages of 40. Both were Presbyterian ministers. One of the men sort of said he's just going to continue doing what he's doing, which was taking the meds and then specifically continuing with his daily Coke regime. And he was dead within a year. The other man sort of went into shock by my question and began questioning things, started taking charge of his life, looking at what he was doing, and ended up, the last I heard, in 2005, he had moved to Denver. So it's about taking charge of your life, which gets back to the issue of the coming out process. Okay, now Jared wrote a question. Can you provide more details about the specific lessons the book discusses that the gay man learns during the coming out process? Well, Jared, that's exactly one of the major points of the book. because the coming out process is divided, for me at least, into three aspects. Now, the first is admitting to yourself who you are, that you are attracted to someone of the same sex. And that is where I talk about, this is about acknowledging, oh, I'm a homosexual. But it's more than that. It's about acknowledging who you are to the world as well. It's about your authenticity. It's about feeling who you are and who you present to the world are the same person. And that means an incredible risk, because you have, the battle of losing possibly your friends, your family, your work, as well as a friend of mine who was a nun and didn't come out until she was in her 30s. It meant losing God for her. So the first step in coming out is that authenticity, which I see as a very ethical act. The second part is looking to a group of like-minded people, which means community. And when you identify with community, that's when it goes from being a homosexual to being gay. Because you're not just identifying a sexual behavior, you're identifying a way of functioning in the world and to whom you look to for support. And the third part of coming out has to do with hope. It's seeing yourself as having a positive future, that there's a life beyond just coming out. And so there are those three aspects of the coming out process. One, being honest to yourself. Two, looking to others who are your peers. And three, with a positive perspective. And that's a lesson that you can use later on as you reach middle age. And you can use it, and actually younger people have also talked and written to me about it, that they find that they can use this as they move along in all phases of life. Okay, Bob Montgomery said, coming out is a lot easier today than it is about 10 years ago, but there's still some hiccups here and there. Well, yes, it is easier in some places and in some states and in some countries, but the hiccups, I'm afraid, are still large. And, given what's going on politically, we may think we're safe, but that isn't necessarily so. It's not written into law that we will always be safe. And I like to use the example that, people think New York City, San Francisco, etc., are meccas for gay men and gay women. But, I'm living in Mexico right now, but briefly I'm in New York. And, having lived in New York for 50 years, there are still areas in New York City, in the boroughs, that I will not and don't feel safe holding my husband's hand while walking down the street. So, yes, Bob, it is safer for most people, but the hotlines are filled with younger people who are living in farm areas, living in rural areas, many in the South, who are afraid to come out because it could mean anywhere from ostracization to even death. And remember, it's only a couple of years ago that homosexual panic was no longer allowed as an excuse for murder. And I remember before when the protests, when people got off, they commit murder and their excuse was, well, I panicked because I'm not gay and I was being forced, etc., etc. Okay. Okay, Sarah Lynch. Are you a man of faith, Harold? Because I've always find it hard to square being gay and being religious. Do you have any ideas on what to do? Well, Sarah, I think that's a very good question because I am a man of faith in the sense of belief in spirituality. Do I believe in religion? Let's put it this way. Any religion that supports people loving each other and treating each other fairly, I will support that. But I myself am not religious, but I respect other people who are. And so for me, I've not had to deal with the fact of how, as you say, squaring being gay and being religious. Um, that's an issue that I think everyone has to deal with individually. Some people can stay within their religion and aware that the religion doesn't have all the right answers and they can be comfortable. Others do it by seeking out a group of the same religion but is gay friendly. Or others simply consider it a spiritual issue. And so I do have faith, as I was saying before about coming out. The final step for me in the coming out process is having faith that one will have a good, fulfilling life as a gay or lesbian person, or now trans persons. Okay, any other questions? And I mean, oh, Brenda Shaw. Should one come out to their family if all signs lead to it being the worst possible option? It's a very hard question to answer because very rarely do the parents, openly know that their child is either a gay or lesbian. And you have to protect yourself. But I think it's important to really ask yourself, are they really homophobic or they simply have not thought about it a lot? It's when you think about the issue about parents who having gay children come out to them, what I have cautioned many as my patients were thinking of finally coming out, I would say, look how long it took you to come out, how many years you thought about it, and fearing the rejection of friends and of family, and knowing that once you come out, you've a sense sort of isolated yourself. And so when parents have to deal with a gay child and all of a sudden are faced with that, that's something that takes them time to deal with. Because number one, it's a shift in their world. Two, they can't basically tell their friends. So when you tell your parents you're gay, you in a way are isolating them too. So I say, be cautious. Give them a little time to get used to it. Don't expect that you can tell your parent and they'll say, oh, fine. Now, there are some who do and are incredibly good at that. But the parents need to know that there are other parents of gays that they can join, like the parents and friends of gays. PFLAG is very important for parents because when you tell your parent you're gay, remember you're kind of isolating them from their friends because now they have a secret they've got to keep. So when you say when you question, should one come out to their family if all signs lead to it being the worst possible option? Then I would say no. But be clear what you're looking at. Is it really your fears that are making you say that? Or is it they've been actively homophobic? And I say that, look, I came out when I shouldn't say I came out. I was out having sex when I was 12 and 13. And I came out to my family because I was arrested by the police at 14. So it was the police who told my family. So I didn't have to go through years and years of hiding. And I eventually left home at 17 to be an openly gay person. Okay, Barbara Brunette says, I love how you tackled complex theme in such a relatable way. It made me reflect on my own life. Well, thank you, Barbara, because that's really what I am interested in. In getting you to look at your life and to see where you are in this whole process. And that's why I wrote the book, because the questions in the book are all about that. It's helping people to move along the path of discovery as we age. Now, I got a very interesting Maria and Barber. Harold, Golden Men is a very interesting title. How'd that come about? Well, I'm really glad you asked that because it's for two reasons. One, gay men have a hard time, by and large, accepting themselves as mature men. The internalized homophobia is pretty strong. So I wanted a book that, from the beginning, it's about gold being burnished, being solid, being a real something you could hold your hands on. And the idea of a golden man is also a play on what used to be known, at least in New York and San Francisco back in the 50s, the golden boy. It was a term used for the new hot man in town. And so he was called the golden boy. So even though people may not understand that reference, for me, it's like, okay, it's the new one in town is the hot older man. So that's where golden men. So it's a double whammy. Oh, Tracy Walls, the pacing of your book was perfect. It kept me hooked from start to finish. Well, thank you, Tracy. I mean, it was a long book. Thank you for staying with it and for the compliment. Now, Justin says the very fact that you are here out and open is a very testament that the world can change for the better. Well, thank you, Justin. I mean, look, Justin, when I was 14, I attempted suicide. I was totally rejected by my family. I was told I would have absolutely no future. There was no one there to support me. And I attempted a very serious suicide attempt. So I know what it's like. And over the years, being an activist, being involved in a lot of pretty heavy activism, eventually around the gay and lesbian issue, I sometimes in my head will talk to that 14-year-old and say, You have no idea what the world is going to be like. You may feel so bleak and so forlorn, but there is a world out there and it can be good. And there are young people who call the hotlines saying the same thing I'm saying or I was feeling then. They're out, they don't have any friends, they're outside in the country or they're in a small town, and they feel totally, completely alone and helpless. And so they call these hotlines, which is one of the reasons why I support all of the hotlines that are around, because they're invaluable. Okay, Mary C. Martin asked, do you have any moments in the past that you look back upon where you have thought you should have done something else? Well, Mary, my husband and I have talked about this a lot over the years. Um, Now, I met my husband when I was 65. I'm now 87. So we've been together 22 years. And he is 6 years younger than me. He's also a Black man, college professor, etc. We're peers in all those usual ways. And we've asked ourselves that very question. And we've always come up with the same answer, which is, if things were different, we wouldn't be where we are right now. So I can say no. I can add to that something which is a little fudgy, but I wished I had had more self-confidence. I would have done some other things differently, because I never thought I was intelligent. I just thought I was a hard worker. And it wasn't until actually in my 40s that I realized, no, I was more than just being a hard worker. I was intelligent. And because of having that low self-esteem, I didn't do certain things. Even though I was active, I was very, very prominent, both locally, nationally, and internationally. There was always that sense of I'm either faking it or I'm hiding behind, and I didn't go for, quotes, the limelight. Other people did, but I was there plodding away, being active, doing the things that I needed to do and I felt were the next steps. So I wouldn't have wanted anything to be different in one sense, but I wished I had more self-esteem and respected myself more and didn't feel like I was putting on a show. Which is actually something that relates to my book, because I talk about the concept of a hologram, of where you don't say who you are, you present someone out there to the public, but you're back in your, behind. And I think that the important point is when we start finally being in our own skin and who we present to the world is who we feel we are, that's a point that it takes many years to get to. And if you're young and you can get to it fast, hallelujah. But that's part of aging. It's getting to be comfortable within yourself. Okay, Anne Laird wrote, the way you address societal issues in your book was eye-opening. Thank you for shedding light on important topics. Well, thank you, Anna, because, it gets back to the school I went to. I was going to be a psychiatrist in pre-med, and I found out about this department at the University of Chicago, which is where I was studying. And it was not psychology. The psychology department was separate. This was where you studied the person as a psychological being in a physical body in a social environment. And that's what I was looking for. And it's that approach why I see society and the culture as being incredibly important when you're looking at a person, because we are a product and react to the society around us. Oh, Betty wrote, your book inspired me to think outside the box. It was a refreshing take on the genre. Well, thank you. That's that, that's the essence of it. Tim wrote, you would have made a wonderful psychiatrist. You seem like a very empathetic person. Well, I'm doing the same thing I would have done as a psychiatrist. Being a psychologist, being a psychiatrist, it's being a good therapist. And that's what I take my pride in. And thank you for saying a very empathetic person, because that's what it is. It's being somebody who can be there and listen to someone. Because for many people, the therapist is the first person they've ever met who sits and really listens to who they are. Oh, Evelyn Jackson, what do you think of the state of the queer community today? Oh, well, I'm afraid we only have a few more minutes, but let me say it's divided, especially now with the whole trans issue coming in. I think it's the same issue we had back in the 70s. There are those of us who felt gay liberation meant showing the world that we are different and we have something to offer. And we were, quotes, the liberationists. But then there are the assimilationists who said, oh, we gay people are no different than heterosexuals. It's just what we do in bed that is different. That argument still goes on today. But unfortunately, trans people are getting the brunt of the homophobia that's been rampant for so many years in this culture. Okay, I'm supposed to show you my book again. Oops. Okay. Golden Men, The Power of Gay Midlife, 2022. Be sure it's the 2022 version, because that has in it the epilogue, which I wrote, which explains that since 2000, so much has happened that has influenced my thinking and the world's thinking. And you think 9/11 happened, the COVID happened, the Black Lives Matter happened, the Me Too movement. These have all reflected and changed much of our thinking. So I'm due to talk tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning. If you want to continue, I'd love for you to come back and we continue the dialogue. And I'm so pleased so many of you have read the book and are getting something from it. That really makes me feel good. So thank you. And let's see, tomorrow again. Yep, 10 o'clock.